I am indeed. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that this day, International Women's Day, which is the 8th of March, the origins of it actually grew out of the labour movement, the workers' movement, when women in New York in the early part of the 20th century, 1908 in fact, thousands of them marched through the city demanding shorter working week and demanding better pay and the right to vote. And the tradition continued right up until the Russian Revolution, when again in the same period the women of Russia took strike action for bread and peace in the middle of the First World War, and that strike forced the abdication of the Tsar. So it's been a pretty powerful memories attached to International Women's Day. One of the songs that goes with it, Bread and Roses, really strikes me for something that argues not just for fair wages and conditions, but also for decent and dignified conditions in our lives, to be treated as decent in a dignified way as human beings. But what strikes me is that this Dáil every year finds one day that we consider it important to discuss gender inequality, and the other 364 days it doesn't really matter all that much. And I think that has to stop. We have to find consistent and persistent and sustained ways of putting gender inequality at the top of the agenda. It's only when some crisis forces it to be discussed, but unfortunately they are more frequent than we care to know, like the mother and baby homes most recently, before that cervical check, and quite frequently domestic violence, which often results in tragic death. During the COVID crisis, the domestic violence situation has really escalated, leaving women in danger, in isolation, men too, but mostly women, and without the supports and the ability to be able to receive shelter. But I do want to make a comment that I think it's outrageous that this country annually spends more on the horse racing industry, which isn't exactly dignifying itself at the moment, than it does on the question of domestic violence. But as has been repeatedly said by other deputies throughout the course of the discussion so far, women disproportionately take on the majority of childcare, of home caring, of nursing, of care working in the hospitals, of cleaning, of shop workers. They are the frontline workers in the main, and they have done us a heroic deed, and I think we need to stick together with our social solidarity to honour the role that they've played in trying to bring this public health crisis into check. And on the 8th of March, the Debenham's workers, who I have to mention for their absolute bravery and consistent fight back, are celebrating, but marking International Women's Day as the 333 day of their strike, and they will be outside their local stores for anybody who wants to show them solidarity. There is one cohort of women, though, that I think have disgracefully been left behind, because, again, we have recognised that most political leaders are not women. Most of the leaders on NEFIT are not women, and I think this is problematic, because I do think that women bring a particular sense of compassion and a particular view on the world order and how to treat and get out of our problems inside that world order. And here I want to just mention the public health doctors, the vast majority of whom are women, but who've been totally sidelined in a public health crisis, who had to take a vote for strike action, and who, because of their compassion, never used that muscle during the pandemic. But here are fully trained public health doctors who are being sidelined by the system. I think it's outrageous, and the same could be said for our laboratory scientists and technicians. We need women's voices as leaders, and we need to be consistent, we need to be persistent, and we need sustained discussion on the issues of gender inequality that face us every day, every year, not just on the 8th of March annually.
Thank you, Deputy Smith. Deputy Barry.